you're talking directly to Vladimir Putin, what would you say to him?
The question of territory, the question of reasons of this war, why he occupied us, this is the problem that, my feeling that his goal was occupation of all our territory, of all our country. And I really want to hear and to see that that he will not come again.
That Putin will not come again. President Zelensky in that interview, as you look at a map of Ukraine, the territories really haven't changed that much over the years as far as what's occupied and what's not. It's just been a back and forth. And figuring out those territories, that is the key issue, as it has been. The United States, and this is, as the president said, offering Ukraine a 15-year security guarantee as part of the peace plan. He would prefer an American commitment of up to 50 years to deter Russia from further attempts to seize its neighbor land by force. Negotiators are still searching for a breakthrough on key issues, however, including whose forces withdraw from where in Ukraine and the fate of Ukraine's Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, one of the 10 biggest in the world. President Trump noting that the months-long U.S.-led negotiations could still collapse, but there is this positive attitude coming out of their meeting. Let's bring in our panel. Roger Zakheim is the Washington director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute, Politico White House Bureau Chief Dasha Burns, and Harold Ford Jr., former Tennessee congressman, co-host of The Five. Dasha, what's your readout of what came out of the Ukraine-U.S. negotiations down at Mar-a-Lago?
Well, Brett, I was surprised by the way Zelensky answered your question about whether or not Ukraine could win this war without the U.S. He was really blunt, and he said, no, we absolutely need American support for so many reasons, including just sort of the mental state of the soldiers on the front lines. Look, you and I have both spoken to the president about this. He is very committed to being the guy that brings peace between Russia and Ukraine. He's been involved in this despite some frustrations from his MAGA base, thinking that he's spending too much time on foreign policy issues, but he's still hunkered down here. The problem is that next year, he's going to have to turn the focus inward. And so there's really urgency right now from everyone that I'm talking to in and around the White House to try to get some serious momentum going. And I'm hearing from allies and from people close to the president that there is optimism because they are getting specific now. They're getting specific about territories. They're getting specific about energy and business. And the way that Trump views it through the mind of a businessman is that tying the economies together of the U.S., of Ukraine, of Russia could be a major part of that security assurance and making sure that all of this that is being built right now is sustainable, Brett.
Yeah. And Roger, there is this optimism, but always, Vladimir Putin is on the other side of this. Today, Putin's told President Trump on a phone call that his residence was attacked by drones. He blamed the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians quickly put out a statement saying it wasn't them, and this is all designed to throw a wrench into negotiations. So we're in this back and forth kind of time.
Well, that's classic Putin. That's what he's done throughout this. But it shouldn't mask the real success we're seeing here that's taking place in the Winter White House. I mean, the Winter White House has been a great success for Vladimir Zelensky and actually for the overall negotiation effort. The United States and Ukraine are on the same page, and President Trump has really delivered a lot of progress. Some of it was just outlined a moment ago, where this 28-point plan is now a 20-point plan. There's an acceptance that there's going to be a demilitarized zone. The question is exactly where on the part of Ukraine. And what Ukraine gets out of that is what it's always wanted, was a security deal, the 15-year security guarantee, Article 5-like guarantee. And that would be something that President Trump has accepted, according to President Zelensky, would go to the U.S. Congress for approval, meaning that it's something that would last beyond President Trump's term in office. That is a lot different than where we were just, a month ago with the 28-point plan, and certainly where things stood between the United States and Ukraine in January of this year.
Harold, what did you take from the interview?
I took a couple of things. First, you were very good. Two, you have to think back where we were in February when President Trump and Vice President Vance and President Zelensky met in the White House. It was not a good meeting. August 15th, Mr. Putin comes to Alaska, and there was some optimism around that. You were there, Brett, if I recall. August 18th, President Zelensky and European leaders come to the White House. There was optimism there. One thing I took away from the interview, three things, but the first is this thing is hard. And I think a lot of the language around the narrative around it, particularly from President Trump, as optimistic and as supportive as I am of his efforts, I think we need to acknowledge that. Two, the Ukrainian military is the best military in Europe. I listened to President Zelensky, as you talked about, and Dasha, I think, mentioned, they can't win without us. We should know that, and we should be supportive of them. Because three, I have never heard President Trump publicly challenge, berate, or ask President Putin, if we go down a path of a resolution here, can you promise publicly that the Russians will not invade Europe? Remember, when the Europeans hear territorial concessions, we in America interpret it perhaps differently. They don't hear territorial concessions as it relates to only Ukraine. They're thinking about Europe as well. And Mr. Putin has made no declaration. Mr. Zelensky has been berated publicly in the United States, but Mr. Putin has not. I look forward to the day, Brett, when you sit down with President Putin and have the honest, fair, demanding interview you had of Mr. Zelensky, who even answered the questions about corruption, I thought with a degree of honesty and force that should allay concerns here in America.
Yeah. We've asked for that interview, and we're working on that. Meantime, Dasha, another world leader, Bibi Netanyahu, meeting at Mar-a-Lago today, and a lot of the headlines around this have dealt with Iran. If you look at the headlines coming from Iran and the leaders there, Iranian president says that the country is basically a total war with the U.S., Israel, and Europe, saying that there is still a full-scale war. Iran is in full-scale war. President Trump kind of responding to all of these headlines today.
Now I hear that Iran is trying to build up again, and if they are, we're going to have to knock them down. We'll knock them down. We'll knock the hell out of them, but hopefully that's not happening. I heard Iran wants to make a deal. If they want to make a deal, that's much smarter.
Dasha, what are you hearing from this meeting today? Everything publicly, despite talk that there was a lot of dust up between the two leaders, sounded pretty positive.
Definitely a lot of praise publicly, and that is strategic on the part of the president, according to what I'm hearing from White House sources. But behind the scenes, a lot of allies and people close to the president are concerned that Netanyahu is in trouble politically at home and that he is sort of creating crisis after crisis to keep himself more safe politically, to create a bit of a bubble around him by continuing to be engaged in conflicts in the region. And there is frustration between the two leaders privately, absolutely. But there's one issue that the president is a hardliner on. He's not a hardliner on a lot, but that is Iran, as you mentioned. He has, from before he was president, said that Iran should never have a nuclear weapon, and that is something that he and Prime Minister Netanyahu agree on. But that relationship has had a rocky road, and I don't think that's over anytime soon, Brett.
I'm going to talk to the Prime Minister Netanyahu tomorrow, get some behind the scenes about this meeting and what's next as far as the peace plan. I want to turn to Minnesota. Roger, this is this Nick Shirley video that's just viral about these federal dollars going out the door.
It's from the state of Minnesota website. It says you have 102 children here in your child care.
Which child care, ma'am? Is a lot of
Minnesota Child Care right here. It's from the state of Minnesota's website. We're just wondering where the children are. Got $2.66 million this year in funding and $2.5 million last year. We're just wondering where the kids are.
Where's the money's going? Look at that. Shut us down. Where are the children at? No children inside of this daycare center.
Other places have done stories on this, but it's really taken off, Roger.
Well, I think it's the scale, also just the nature of the reporting, what you just shared, and it's viral on social media. Generally, we kind of, as a throwaway line, talk about waste, fraud, and abuse as it relates to federal government or the entitlement state. Here, we're actually seeing it play out before our eyes. And I think the challenge here is whether or not the federal government, the Congress, the executive branch are going to get after this and actually drive some reform of the entitlement state, which is allowed for this waste, fraud, and abuse at a shocking scale. That's the challenge.
I am 15 seconds here, Harold.
Let the chips fall where they may, Brett. And I hope Mr. Shirley has proven to be a pretty adept and clever journalist, goes to other states, because it's not just happening in Minnesota.
That's right. It could be the tip of the iceberg. Panel, thanks so much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.